A Tall and Small Collection, Season 2, Chapter 26, Confessions to the Unconscious. Quiet. Peace. Finally, there was a moment of calm in the home. Even though everyone was still recovering, they knew they were safe and had drifted off to sleep. Well, everyone except Ashlynn. She couldn't sleep. She dared not sleep. There was a compounding, spiraling fear that they would be gone when she opened her eyes. It would have been so easy for the other borrowers to gang up on the family she knew and loved. The emergency flashlight across the room was aglow dimly, like a flickering candle. It wasn't enough to ease the humans' unease. Were they being watched? Would they, whoever they were, make another attempt? Was this a message for her, or for other borrowers? Were they saying this would happen to others if they befriended humans? Even after helping them, there was such mistrust. It made Ashlynn frustrated and angry. She imagined this was how Soren and his family felt, being watched and small, knowing there was nothing she could do to stop it. So, with her churning mind, Ashlynn stayed awake with the light on her bedside table on, as well as the emergency flashlight in the hallway. The tenseness in her body wouldn't relent, even as she looked at all of the borrowers sleeping. Ray, braced firmly in place, was asleep on his side. Dorian tried to stay up with Ashlynn, but his own ordeal left him exhausted too. They were curled up together with Maisie in the middle. All three slept in the makeshift tent Ashlynn made on the bedside table to shield them from the light that was still on, and it evidently was enough. Ashlynn could see the tops of their heads from under the blankets, Maisie's wavy brown and auburn-kissed hair tousled in between Ray and Dorian's sandy blonde heads of hair. It wasn't them, however, who she was really worried about. It was Soren. Thankfully, borrowers were hardy and more resilient than humans, but not by much. He was stiff and lethargic all afternoon and into the evening. He drank the hot liquids Ashlynn offered him, but it was obvious he needed a good night's sleep, nestled in blankets way too big for him to recover fully by the next day. Ashlynn couldn't help but think over and over that if she were gone just one more minute, she'd be too late. No. He was still here. He was alive. He was going to be fine. That was what she had to remind herself of over and over as she stared at Soren's sleeping form. Unlike his brothers or daughter, Ashlynn insisted on having him sleep next to her on the bed next to her pillow so she could monitor his condition. Even after hours of time on the heating pad and sleep, he was still having a hard time moving and couldn't quite get warm. Not that it was unexpected. Some of the articles Ashlynn read said that an uncomplicated recovery could take as long as 48 hours to recover from. If Soren didn't feel better by tomorrow afternoon, Ashlynn would have real reason to worry. It was one of the reasons why she wanted him to be close, among other reasons. The blanket, which was hundreds of times his size, was pulled up over his left shoulder, but his left arm and head were exposed. Ashlynn could see the bruises on his face and arms clearer now, which only enraged her. If she ever found out who was responsible, it would be a bad day for those borrowers. Screw the consequences. This was personal. This was family. Her family. Weren't there enough dangers out there for borrowers? People, pets, heights, the elements. Now, their own? Ashlynn's heart swelled as she let out a puff of frustrated air which ruffled Soren's hair. He stirred slightly, which made her pause and wait to see if he would wake. Instead, He nestled further under the blankets around him. He looked so peaceful. Ashlynn dared to think to herself that he was still rather handsome, and a tad rugged-looking, with the bruises on his cheek and by his eye. It was completely involuntary, but she didn't care. She reached out and carefully laid her hand just barely on top of him, palm to his back. His face and arm were exposed, and Ashlynn took a fraction of a second and delicately brushed the side of her thumb along Soren's exposed arm before setting her thumb down on the bed beside him. It hit her earlier that day, but seeing him there made her really think. She could have lost him. He could be gone, right now. His brothers would be alone and hurt without him. Maisie would never know what a fantastic man her father was, except through second-hand stories. He would be gone, and never know what she had felt in her heart for so long. He would never know how giddy she felt when he walked out of the walls. He wouldn't know that his warmth and his touch made her the happiest woman in the world. Soren wouldn't know how much their talks meant to her, how his laugh and his smile were the last things she thought of for so many nights. Soren would never know this if things were worse. Ashlynn couldn't keep it in any longer. She at least had to say it out loud, even if he didn't hear. Keeping it locked in her mind created an echo chamber of agony and regret. "Soren?" asked Ashlynn, in the softest, tenderest tone she could muster. The sound of her voice sounded oddly muted in the silent apartment. Several seconds passed, and then Soren inhaled deeply, stretching slightly into her touch, but he did not nod or respond. His eyes didn't even flicker open for a second. She wanted to be sure. "Soren, are you awake?" Nothing. Everything in her heart and her head felt like it was about to explode out of her. Heart pounding in her chest, she took a breath and let the words she had kept at bay slip from her lips, whispering the precious secret that it was. I'm so glad you're okay. You had me so scared there for a while, Soren," whispered Ashlynn. "I haven't been that scared in a long time." Soren didn't make a move or show he was aware or conscious. "Soren, I want to tell you something. Something I never told you before. You told me once that you were indebted to me. You told me once that you owed me for saving your life and your brother's life all those years ago. You said you could never pay me back. But you need to know I'm the one who can't pay you back. Not that I'm keeping tally," said Ashlynn. Her voice was shaking, as was her hand that was still around Soren's body. Out of the corners of her eye, she spotted those all-too-familiar lines that had long since healed on her wrists. They were a harsh reminder of one of those dark times in her life that she tried to keep buried in her memory, but always resurfaced when she noticed them. "The truth is that you saved me first." Ashlynn closed her eyes and remembered the first day she found him. She could still feel everything she experienced that day, just before she met Soren, found him snapped beneath the mousetrap. The agony, the rage, no one to turn to. The hopeless, sinking sensation when something inevitable ends up happening despite everything you did to stop it. She remembered the frustration and apprehension of what was to come and the confusion and curiosity from seeing this small humanoid under the mousetrap that fateful day. "You saved me," she echoed as she opened her eyes to look at him. Her fingers curled slightly against Soren. You see, I had just come home from the courthouse. I had to testify against my boyfriend, my fiancé. He was unkind to me, and I thought I could fix him. I was wrong. We were toxic, and I knew it, but I was in love with him. I didn't know what to do. My world felt like it was crumbling. Ashlynn gazed at Soren's features. The way his hair fell into his eyes as he slept, and the curve of his spine fitting perfectly against Ashlynn's hand, made her adore him all the more. She couldn't stop confessing everything if she tried. Not now. I didn't know what to do. No one was going to miss me anymore. It felt like what happened when I was younger. I figured I would just slip into the bathtub, put on a show, drink a little too much, and then just slip away. She paused for a daring breath. That's when I saw you on the floor. You needed help, and so did I. If that wasn't a sign, I didn't know what was. Soren readjusted slightly under the covers, but was still asleep. Ashlynn paused, just long enough to see if he would open his eyes, but he didn't. She sighed and kept talking. There was something reassuring about saying everything out loud to someone, even if they couldn't hear you. You saved my life, Soren. And I never thanked you for that, said Ashlynn. She felt warm, salty tears stinging the corners of her eyes. They threatened to fall down her cheeks and onto her pillow. He was still out like a light. Her entire body seemed to be vibrating with anticipation. There was a fluttering in her chest, making her anxious, but also excited. If she didn't speak these feelings that made her chest ache and her heart flutter and flip, she would lose the nerve forever. She knew it. There's something else, Soren. I don't even know how to say this, but it's been weighing on my heart. Ashlynn smiled to herself. I don't know when or even how it's possible, but I have to tell you because I don't want to let you go without saying it out loud. No regrets. I'm in love with you. Like a freed river, the emotions came flooding out of her. Ashlynn found an unstoppable smile crossing her face, and she chuckled to herself, feeling ridiculous at how good it felt to say it out loud. She wanted to do it again. She wanted to scream it from the rooftops. Instead, she said it again, like the precious secret it was. I'm in love with you, Soren, she whispered. You've helped me become the person I am. I don't know how you always make me smile and laugh, but you do. I knew the moment I left that day that it was a mistake, that I was afraid. I wasn't sure if it was right or just circumstance that made me feel the way I did. The way I still do. Ashlynn gazed at Soren's sleeping form. I just wanted you to know. I needed to put it out there. I don't expect you to feel the same way. I don't want you to force feelings either. I know you have someone you're interested in. And I'm honestly just happy to even be here in your life. I just want you to be happy. And that'll make my world, because that's what you are. That's what you've become. You and Maisie and Dorian and Ray, smiled Ashlynn. The nervous thrill of falling for someone made her head spin. At the same time, Seeing him cupped in her hand made her see the one very obvious difference between them. She wasn't sure how it would even work. Would he even want it to work? Because she knew she did. She stared at Soren for a moment longer when a dangerous thought crept into her mind. It crossed her mind before, but everything between her nerves and excitement had her mind in a whole new mentality. She sat up on her elbow slowly and carefully did not disturb the bed as she gazed at Soren. Her heart pounded harder in her chest. The nerves just below her skin felt electrified. The thought in her mind grew and blossomed. It was now or never. She held her breath and leaned down, moving her hands slightly out of the way until she was just barely an inch from him. Mustering all of the courage and tenderness she possibly could, Ashlynn closed the distance and kissed Soren. It was just on his chest, and it was only for a second. But what a thrilling second that was. She pulled away and laid her head against her pillow again, finding her emotions overwhelming at the moment. Ashlynn felt Soren readjust, but he remained quiet and still. After a little while, her eyes tired, and she let herself drift off to sleep, hand gently placed just over the man she adored. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known as she drifted off to sleep, was Soren heard it all. Soren wasn't sure if he was dreaming or not. He thought he nodded when she asked if he was awake. Did he not? It was a strange, lucid dreaming state he couldn't quite wake from. It was like he was there, and yet he wasn't at the same time. It was, as they say, an out-of-body experience, but he heard it all. Ashlynn's past, what she was thinking, what she was feeling. Did he even hear her right? She loved him. She was in love with him. She had been feeling this way for quite some time, and now he knew it for certain. When she kissed him, when her soft lips pressed against his chest, his mind sent him over the moon. The mental and emotional rush was the release of tension he had wanted for so long. His heart pounded, and he was thrilled beyond words. He knew the feelings were mutual now. He wanted to say something, but his body and the dreamlike state his mind was in wouldn't let him. By the time he managed to fight his way out of his stupor, Ashlynn was fast asleep, hand resting over him like the guardian angel she was. Now he was faced with a conundrum. Ashlynn thought he was sleeping the whole time, and in a way he was. The question now wasn't whether or not Ashlynn had feelings for him, but it was how he was going to tell her that he was in a dreamlike stupor, and he heard her entire confession.